Well, here we are. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past week, you've no doubt heard at least a little something about The Last of Us Part 2. And now it's time for me to give my thoughts on the game. And just like many others, I have a lot of things to say. This is such a hard game to talk about though, because so much of the discourse surrounding it is based entirely upon the spoilers. But since I always put out spoiler-free reviews, I don't want to leave you guys hanging if you came here expecting a review free of spoilers. So when it comes to discussing the story, I'm going to break this video up into a spoiler-free story section and a spoiler section. And I will warn you when the spoiler section is coming up. I also know that the biggest point of contention with this game is undoubtedly the story, and some people may be coming here just to hear my thoughts on that, which I can understand. And I normally cover story first in my reviews, but this time I want to do something a bit different because I think that a lot of people's anger and disappointment with the story is leading many people to completely gloss over the fantastic achievements in the gameplay and the visuals. So I want to talk about those first, before diving into the story. But with that all out of the way, let's get into my review for The Last of Us Part 2. Every game that Naughty Dog releases seems to raise the bar for graphics and presentation, and The Last of Us Part 2 just sent that bar into the stratosphere. This is by far the best looking video game I have ever played, and the level of detail in every environment is absolutely mind-blowing. Every single nook and cranny of the world has been so meticulously crafted to feel real and engaging, and it really helps immerse you in the experience. This game also has some of my favorite environment design of any video game, and it feels like the game is constantly one-upping itself with the environments as it progresses. From the sprawling and overgrown downtown Seattle, to the water-filled city streets, to the neighborhoods lost to nature, and back to the great open fields in Jackson. This game is an absolute knockout in terms of environment design, and while I won't talk about the late game here because I'm avoiding spoilers, I have to say that the last 6 hours of the game contain some of the coolest visuals I've ever seen in a video game. But it's not just the gorgeous environments that set it ahead of the competition, it's the attention to detail in literally every aspect. Every movement has a crisp and precise animation. Blood and dirt will splash onto Ellie's face and clothing. Executing enemies sees their blood trickle down their neck and fling onto nearby surfaces. Snow is fully reactive. The water begins to turn red as the blood spills out of fallen enemies, and so much more. The motion capture work done for this game is also incredible, and the whole cast is brought to life with easily the most realistic faces and animations in any video game to date. The voice actors also do a terrific job, and I swear to God, if Ashley Johnson does not get some sort of award for her performance as Ellie, someone should be shot because she is just incredible.
Tell me where she went and I'll think about letting you go.
We could have killed you.
Maybe you should have.
And to top all of this off, we got another fantastic soundtrack from my boy Gustavo. This time with some additional music from Matt Quayle. It's just as great as the first game's soundtrack, if not even better, and the haunting guitar melodies will more than likely get stuck in your head as you play through it. Now, while this game is pretty far ahead of others in terms of its presentation, it isn't entirely flawless, as the PS4's relatively weak hardware means you will experience a decent bit of pop-in, especially in larger areas. There are also a few bugs here and there, like this time where the game locked me into an animation for opening a locker, but I was also in the middle of grabbing someone, and then I ended up just standing there unable to do anything. The frame rate is also set to only 30 FPS, but it actually does a really good job of maintaining that frame rate, only dropping below it briefly on a few occasions over the course of this 25-hour game. That is especially impressive when you take into account all the insane stuff that is happening on screen during the late game, which I won't spoil here, but just know it gets pretty intense and it's very impressive what they've been able to do. Overall, I say this game is pretty much as good as it gets from an art and design perspective. Very minor flaws aside, I'd consider this to be the best looking game ever made, and it certainly has the best looking cutscenes of any game, and the performances and soundtrack are just perfect. The first Last of Us was a stealth-driven game that was mainly focused around being smart with your resources and only engaging in full-out action when you needed to. I think the gameplay of that holds up pretty well and it makes for some really fun, intense shootouts, but it does fall a bit flat in certain areas. Thankfully, The Last of Us 2 takes what made the first game's combat good and improves upon it in almost every way. The levels are far more open and sprawling with tons of different paths to choose from, allowing you to complete each section in many different ways. The enemy AI is also much better, and playing on the harder difficulties will give you some really good stealth game AI. They still have their moments of normal video game AI, but for the most part, they are pretty perceptive and realistic. Being visible or making too much noise will attract them, but being spotted by one person doesn't mean you failed if you can deal with them fast enough. The enemies will also realistically stop and start searching for you, which makes things so much more engaging. If you get spotted, they go into alert mode and will hunt you down, but if you're able to escape and hide again, then they go back into a more passive search mode. They still know you're out there, but they can't see you, so they don't just charge at you like they did in the first game.
What? How did I get spotted?
The introduction of hiding in grass is also a really nice mechanic because, unlike other games, it's not just an instant win. You are less visible in the grass, but enemies can still see you if the grass is too short or if they get too close, which makes sure that you are always on your toes. Some enemies also now walk around with dogs that can track your scent and force you to move quickly so as to not get hunted down. It's never a joy if you get caught and have to kill the poor doggos, but the inclusion of them certainly makes for some really tense moments. And the ability to lay prone and dive in multiple directions is also a nice addition that feels so smooth and honestly makes for some of the coolest looking combat animations I've seen in a while. There's so much you can do with it too, and this dude on Twitter has been going absolutely insane with the game, popping off with some crazy clips like what you're seeing now. There is also a new dedicated dodge button that really helps amplify the intensity of the melee combat and allows you to feel like you're in control of these situations instead of just mashing the attack button. And the gore physics are on another level of detail. I mean, holy shit, this game is brutal. You can take off people's limbs and let them bleed to death as they scream. Torsos will be ripped to shreds by your shotgun and explosives. Sniper bullets will send enemies flying backwards, and the melee finishers are just so crunchy and nasty. It's possibly the most realistic gore I've seen in any game, and it fits the tone of the world and story incredibly well. The game is also much more open than the previous title, even giving us a couple semi-open world segments that can be explored relatively freely. Now, this is still a very linear experience overall, but it is nice to see that the game can mix it up in a few sections and give you some room to explore. Because of this, the game also introduces a new set of traversal mechanics that I think work pretty well. They aren't anything like groundbreaking, but it's a nice addition that helps keep the open areas feeling fresh and more fleshed out. And last but certainly not least, I need to talk about some of the action set pieces in this game. Since this is part of the spoiler review, I don't want to show any of the late game or major story set pieces, but I want to say that they're absolutely bananas. Like, they're just insane, and they're easily some of the best and most refined set pieces I have ever played through. Oh, and I also really enjoyed the collectibles. All the superhero trading cards are really fun to pick up and read, and they're a nice extension of the comic books from the previous game. Overall, I love the gameplay in The Last of Us 2, and I have no real complaints. Some people may not be drawn to it as much as me due to the stealth action style, but I am a huge fan of stealth games, and I think this is by far the best stealth combat I've ever played. Alright, now we get to the moment that I'm sure everyone has been waiting for, my conversation about the story. It's been such a hotly debated thing, and it's time for me to finally add my 2 cents into the mix. And I gotta be honest with you guys, I think the story is fucking great. Wait. Give it a chance. Let me explain myself first. I'll go into specific details in my spoilers section about why I think it works, but for the spoiler-free section, I'll say that this game is definitely not what people expected going into it. I know it's certainly not what I expected, but after playing it, I can't really see a much better way for them to continue the story from the first game. All of people's suggestions online about how to fix the story just seem to turn it into an uplifting, heroic, but slightly sad action story, which I think would have been significantly more boring, and I just don't think that would have fit the tone of The Last of Us at all. Another thing that I also see is that a lot of people who have mixed feelings on the game say that they think, well, it's a good game, but they don't know if it's something that they like, because it's so dark and sad and uncomfortable, and it does not leave you with a good feeling. But that's precisely why I love it. I've never felt such a strong range of emotions when playing a game before, and it was an absolutely riveting experience. There were literally times where I felt physically sick to my stomach, and not because of like excessive gore or anything gross like that, but because the characters and their actions and what I had to do. If you don't really like being challenged by art, or you don't like playing games that can be pretty harsh and depressing at times, then I would suggest staying away, but I absolutely love when art does not shy away from super harsh and uncomfortable situations, and I like stuff that forces you to think or see things differently. Characters in this game will make choices that you don't agree with or do things that you initially hate, and the game wants you to stop, take a step back, use your brain, and see it from their side. As I'll talk about in my spoiler section, too many people seem to have lionized certain characters, and they let their personal attachment to them completely blind them from the fact that there are no real heroes or villains in the game. Everyone makes choices, some good, some bad, but they can all be kinda justified from each person's perspective. It's a game where everything is not black and white, and it's bold and unexpected, and it really elicited some very strong visceral reactions from me, and for that, I think it's fantastic. Alright, now's the time to get into the spoilers, so if you don't want to have the game spoiled, skip to the time on your screen to go to my final thoughts and rating of the game. You have been warned, because I'm about to get into it in 3, 2, 1. So basically, the big spoilers here are a character named Abby kills Joel in the beginning of the game, and halfway through the game, you play as Abby for about 10 hours or so. I won't cover every little detail because I don't want this video to drag on for 40 minutes, but I also want to give a more detailed explanation as to why I think the way I do. So let's begin, and I want to get it out of the way right now. Abby is a bad character. I mean, she kills Joel, and her character arc is stupid. All she does is lose a loved one, go down a dark and violent path before she meets a young child who she rejects at first, but eventually she starts to form a bond with this child and ends up helping them on their journey. Oh shit. Look, Abby's character arc is very similar to Joel's from the first game, which is something that was clearly done on purpose. And while there are certainly differences between the two, I think most people who are saying Abby is a bad character are just mad that she killed Joel and everything else that happens just completely goes out the window. If there is anyone watching this that dislikes Abby, I would actually like to know why. Because every time I ask someone online, they either just say, well, I just don't like her, and that doesn't really help me, or they say something about her being an agenda, which anyone who's talking about agendas in this game, you can just ignore what they have to say because it's not intelligent. Or they also sometimes say, well, she's just poorly written, and then they don't give me examples when I ask further. So if you are someone who doesn't like her, I would genuinely like to know why in the comments below. Because to me, it seems like a lot of people have just lionized Joel and now view him as this like epic hero when he's very much not a hero. He's done tons of bad things in the past, and he ended the first game by killing a ton of people and kinda damning the world and lying to Ellie. From reading more complaints, it seems like a lot of folks also think Joel's death is just disrespectful, and they wanted Joel to go out like Logan or Arthur Morgan on some epic hero moment. Most of these people's fixes to his death essentially end in him heroically sacrificing himself to save Ellie. And I honestly think if they did that, the game would have been significantly shittier, and the story would have actually disrespected the first Last of Us. I mean, did you guys just not play the first game? It is a very dark and cruel and unforgiving world where no character gets a heroic or deserving death. You mean to say that Sarah deserved that death? What about Sam, Henry, Tess, Riley? Did any of them go out on an epic note? No, because that is the world of The Last of Us. It's brutal and unforgiving, and people can die at any moment, so why would Joel somehow get a super heroic death? He made a selfish choice at the end of the first game, and he faces the consequences for that choice in this game. And before someone says, well, the Fireflies were not great. Yeah, no, I know. I totally get that. Both sides are at fault here. I'm not saying that Joel is the villain, but I'm also saying that he's not the hero either. And from Abby's point of view, it makes sense why she would want to kill him. Another point of contention people seem to have is that they just refuse to empathize with Abby, and I still think that's a byproduct of people lionizing Joel. When you start the game, you are supposed to hate Abby. I mean, the whole event of her killing Joel is the catalyst for Ellie going on her revenge journey, and you spend the first 10 hours hating her. But once you get to the game's climactic theater scene, the whole thing stops. You get the flashback of Abby from 4 years ago. You discover that she was actually an old Firefly, and her dad was the doctor that Joel killed in the first game. Then you go back to current times and replay the past 3 days from Abby's perspective. It's a very bold take for the game, and I was initially not a fan, but Abby and her friends started to grow on me, and soon enough I became invested in their storyline too and realized that, hey, Abby and Ellie are really just two sides on the same coin. They both have families and friends that they care about. They are both generally good people. They both have flaws. They've also both done very bad things, but they're both kind of justified in their actions when you see it from their perspective. Once you go through all that, I just don't get why people still despise Abby. Moving on from that, one of the big themes the game harps on is the cycle of violence, and how it can go on forever and how it never leads to anything productive. And it's on full display as both sides go back and forth killing each other, until Abby and Ellie finally face off in one of the most uncomfortable boss fights ever, where the player plays as Abby and has to fight Ellie. It's so weird and uncomfortable, and I think it's fucking amazing. I totally saw both sides of the story and felt that each person had a reason to want the other dead, which made it so hard to get through. But like I said in my spoiler-free section, I love the fact that this game is able to get me to elicit such a visceral response to that. I guess people just wanted a straightforward story, but I loved the fact that the game decided to go with this dual narrative route. I thought this was a much more creative and interesting story that was a cool way to recontextualize everything you've already done and get you to completely change your initial point of view. If you just didn't want that, that's fine, but I can tell you that I certainly don't want it to change. People also seem to be pretty upset at the ending, particularly the fact that Ellie doesn't end up killing Abby. I think the ending is really good, and while it's definitely not as succinct and immediately as impactful as the first game's ending, I think it's still a really good way to end the game. To explain my interpretation of it, I need to go back a bit, so let's start right after the fight in the theater. Basically, Abby wins and goes to finish off Ellie and Dina, but is stopped by Lev, symbolizing her own personal journey that she went on, and despite how losing a lot, she still has something left to fight for. Because of this, Abby chooses to spare Ellie and Dina, trying to break the cycle and let each party go about their separate ways. And Ellie should have left it behind there. That would have been the correct choice. She lost, she got her friends killed, but she and Dina survived, and it's time to give up. But she just can't let it go. She's still haunted by survivor's guilt because she really did want to die in that hospital. She's still haunted by the memory of Joel, who she was never able to forgive for her actions, as shown in their last meeting before his death. And because of this inability to let go, Ellie leaves her family behind and goes after Abby one more time because she just can't let it go, almost like an addict. At that point for me, Ellie nears becoming the villain. And while it's made clear that there are no heroes or villains in this game, I will say that I genuinely did not want her to go and kill Abby because doing so would not help her in any way. It's not going to give her the closure that she needs, as proven by Abby's side of the story. It won't bring Joel back, it won't bring back Jesse, it won't bring back Dina and JJ, and if she went through with it, she would then have to kill Lev in cold blood because he could very easily come back and try to kill Ellie, thus continuing the cycle. The final confrontation between Abby and Ellie is one of the most insanely visceral and disturbing fights that has some seriously hard to watch shit. But eventually, after getting her fingers bit off, Ellie comes out on top. She starts to drown Abby, but before she finishes, she gets a flashback from her last conversation with Joel and she just can't do it and lets Abby go. Now, this may be a bit confusing, but after thinking about it for a while, I think this makes sense. To me, I think that a good bit of Ellie's anger with Abby was also an extension of her anger with Joel, especially because she never got the chance to forgive Joel due to Abby killing him. So in a way, I think that Ellie letting Abby go is almost an extension of her forgiving Joel, hence why she has a flashback to that exact conversation right before she makes the decision to let Abby live. I think some of the parallels between the characters strengthen this idea, since Abby has a very similar arc to that of Joel's, as well as how Ellie's first kill came when she killed the man that was trying to drown Joel, and now she finds herself in that man's position. And I think if Ellie kills Abby here, she becomes the villain, and the fact that she didn't shows that there is still hope for her. After Abby killed Joel, her nightmares didn't go away. As we see in her section, she kept having them and she didn't find any peace from the act of killing Joel. Her revenge, like pretty much all revenge, did not actually bring her the peace that she sought. She only found it after she completed her redemption arc with Lev. And I think it's really interesting to see Abby's character after getting revenge, and then see Ellie's character before getting revenge. Their characters are going in opposite directions, as Abby has already been over the brink and is coming back from it, and Ellie is inching closer and closer to that edge. By sparing Abby, I think this stops Ellie from falling into that abyss, and really gives her hope for the future. Because while it's certainly very sad and a bit depressing how Ellie's inability to let go has destroyed her life, by the end she is able to get rid of her baggage. She was able to let go of her obsession with Abby by sparing her life and ending the cycle of violence between them. She was able to let go of Joel, as evident by her leaving the guitar behind, and she is finally able to accept the fact that she has been given the gift of life, and despite her wanting to have died in that hospital all those years ago, she knows that she can't change that, so she needs to move on and live her life. It's heartbreaking because it sucks to see a character we care about destroy herself, but I think it makes for an incredibly hard-hitting and engaging story. It may not have been the story we expected, and it certainly wasn't a story that made us feel good by the end, but I'll be damned if I didn't think that this was a perfect way to continue the storyline. I do think arguments can probably be made that certain things could have been conveyed better, and if you have a complaint like that, feel free to leave it in the comments below, but personally, I have no major complaints with the story. Also, goddamn, can we appreciate how amazing these set pieces are? I mean, like, this is some of the craziest shit I have ever experienced in any video game. Like, holy fuck. This is a really hard-hitting game that is an absolute emotional roller coaster throughout the entire story. I think it's also the first game where I beat it and immediately started up another playthrough, and if I hadn't let my PS4 to a friend so he could play through parts 1 and 2, rest assured, I would be on playthrough number 3 right now. If you've made it this far into the review, I sincerely thank you for hearing me out. If you found this video off of a YouTube search and you were expecting me to shit on the story, I want to especially thank you for sticking around and listening to my take on it. I know I'm going to get some dislikes, likely from people who haven't even played the game themselves, but I'm fine with that, because this is genuinely my thoughts on the game. You can't say that I've been bought, and you can't say that I don't rip games to shreds when I hate them, but I genuinely think this game is absolutely phenomenal on all fronts. When 2020 started, I was super excited for the games we were about to get. Resident Evil 3, Ghost of Tsushima, Cyberpunk 2077, Last of Us 2, Ghost Runner, and Doom Eternal. But I gotta be honest with you, after I played Doom Eternal, my outlook kinda changed. That game was just so incredible that my excitement for others dwindled a little bit, because I knew that some would be great, but I was so sure that nothing would be able to top Doom Eternal in 2020. Oops. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on the game in the comments below or in the poll on the top right of your screen. And stay tuned for more info about my own game. I planned to have it out sooner, but Last of Us 2 kind of consumed my life for the past week and a half, and I literally did nothing but play this game, watch this game, talk about this game, or write about this game. So my plans got shifted back a bit. I still want to put those videos out, but I don't know when, though they will be out soon, as we finally seem to have gotten most of the business side of things sorted for the game. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.